Hey everyone, this is Eddie Kalegi with Tim Moore reminding you that SportsSpeak is now powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the one-stop shop for tickets to sporting events, concerts, and so much more.
Use the promo code SportsSpeak at checkout for $20 off your first purchase.
SeatGeek, let there be live. Now, on to the show. Happy weekend, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of SportsSpeak Live, edition number 169, powered by SeatGeek. Promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word. $20 off your first online purchase. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Well, the Major League Baseball season is underway, and it's been good for some teams, not so good for others. We'll talk about that. Also, we got women's basketball, men's basketball, Final Four coming up this weekend. Some great stories. And how about women's basketball getting its most viewed game ever this past Monday when LSU and Iowa had their rematch? We'll dive into that as well. But of course, as you can see by the shirt and the field behind me, let's begin with the Amazons, who have been anything but amazing to start this season. And I preface it with this. I had low expectations going into the season to begin with, given what the roster looked like, as I alluded to in our season preview, but this is a disaster. They're 1-5 to start the season. I do not care that they had this come from behind victory today. While it was very nice in the ninth inning, they had been no hit for 13 consecutive innings before Harrison Bader had a single in the eighth inning. This is against the Tigers. Milwaukee and Detroit, you go 1-5 at home against them. You have the Reds and Braves, two playoff-bound teams coming up on the road. Those are going to be even worse than this series. These are games you should win. Milwaukee is not good. They traded away their rotation and everybody else is hurt. The Tigers have been irrelevant for 10 years, and the Mets just get absolutely trounced by them. And the frustrating thing is the pitching has been fine. It's been the offense that's been lethargic. Nobody's doing anything besides Alvarez and Alonso. It's been a disaster for McNeil, for Nimmo, for Lindor, and so many other players on this team. And you bring in Carlos Mendoza, who doesn't know what he's doing as the manager. Why are you wasting Edwin Diaz in game one of a doubleheader in a non-save situation? You waste six pitchers. You got Michael Tonkin out there, who's horrible, who's awful. And again, you got Mendoza, you got Harrison Bader, you got Luis Severino, who looked awful as expected. How many players off the Yankees scrap heap can the Mets keep bringing in? Curtis Granderson's the only one that's worked out in the last 10 years. So I don't want to hear any more of this from Tim for the millionth time about, oh, the Yankees are a disaster. The fact of the matter is they're going to be winning over 500. They're going to be over 500 for like the 30th straight year. I don't want to hear any more of this. The Mets are the disaster here. They're not competitive. This is a non-competitive team to start this season, and I have no expectations for them going forwards given these first six games. This rotation is abysmal, and the crazy thing is that's not been the worst part. It's this horrible offense. So I don't really know where the Mets go from here, but to go 1-5 to start the season, embarrassing. It's completely embarrassing. As Gary Cohen said on the broadcast, the Mets hit rock bottom in the seventh inning of that game. It's just brutal. And I mean, this team does not have much there. Plus, there's the whole overshadowing with Pete Alonso. Will he be traded at the deadline? Because clearly Steve Cohen doesn't want to spend the money to sign him to a contract, which is really aggravating when he is basically the face of the franchise at this point. And you got all the drama with McNeil from opening day with Hoskins and all that. It's a mess. It's really bad. And I don't know where they go from here. And again, I'll reiterate it one more time just to prove the point. Tim, I don't want to hear any more from you about the fact of the matter is this. The New York Yankees are a disaster. They're going to get 85 wins. They do every single year. The Mets do not do that. That's not going to happen because the Mets rotation is completely pathetic. And the lineup, you have Lindor, you have Nimmo, and you have McNeil. They're a combined 3 of 50 to start the year. 3 of 50. That's not some fake stat that Frank the Tank made up to make a point. That is the truth. That is the cold, hard truth. And to go 1-5 against Detroit and Milwaukee at home to start the year is a complete embarrassment. And you need a come from behind win today in game 2 of a doubleheader just to avoid going winless on the opening homestand of the year. It's a disaster. This is what a true disaster looks like.
Well, Eddie, it's funny you mentioned that because last episode we talked about the Mets and its future, right? And what I thought I was going to see out of this team this year. And truthfully, I thought the Mets had the potential of being a top 7 offense in Major League Baseball with things put all together. But I mentioned as well what you need production from, and that's your money players, right? Your Brandon Nimmo's, your Francisco Lindors, who might I add are batting what a .050 at this point in the season and 1 and 2 in the order. You mentioned Pete Alonso doing great. Francisco Alvarez looks great. Also, another one as well that's had a pretty average start to the year, Starling Marte. But when you're looking at 3 of 9 in a starting lineup, that's the real problem for the Mets. And even when you get JD Martinez, because I know he will still bat around that 300 mark, you need everyone batting in unison. And unfortunately for the Mets, and I kind of said it a few hours ago, I'm not sure if you saw the text or not. I wasn't really looking at chat. But when I look at the Mets to start this year, and again, there's a long way to go 162 game season. It will get better for the Mets offensively, but you can't play to this low as level as they did. But what I am watching at the start of this year for the Mets is literally an Aaron Judgeless Yankees from last season. The Mets cannot execute with runners in scoring position. I'll take it from game 1 today. Francisco Lindor, runner on second, no outs in the 9th inning. You're telling me that you can't even find a way to bunt or move over a runner, knowing how hard it's been to score runs for the Mets pretty much throughout the first 4 games of the season. You're telling me that you can't put yourself 90 feet away from scoring. And yeah, Pete Alonso, all right, strikes out in the big spot to end that game. But guess what? He redeems himself in games 2, hits the walk off, or excuse me, hits a big clutch shot that sets the Mets up at least for the walk off single. But overall, either way, you know, for the Mets moving forward, we knew the pitching staff was going to be a disaster. I would say they've pitched relatively well, except for 1 game. But yeah, this is what happens when you get an inexperienced manager to put it in. I just really thought this team offensively, talent-wise, was a possible team. And again, I said the Mets upside this year, upside at best was the number 3 wild card. I saw them being on the cusp of 500, if not about 72, 73 win team. But this is miserable. When you're talking about teams like the Oakland A's having more potential than the Mets to start this season, that's an embarrassment. And I'm eager to see what happens for the Mets moving forward. But Eddie, and I know you may not want to see this as a Mets fan, but truthfully, moving forward, if this is going to be the path of direction for the rest of this year for the Mets, I think the best case scenario. I know you want Pete Alonso for the long term, but trading him may help the direction. Trading Edwin Diaz may help the direction. If this is a full-fledged disaster, you need to get every single detriment or positive person off this team to create a full-blown rebuild, because it cannot continue moving like this. It's embarrassing to see what I've seen for the first 6 games. And I know the Mets have been disappointing in past years, but this is not the Mets baseball I know of the last 2 years. And for all Steve Cohen has gone about, and I mentioned it last episode too, nobody's going to complain that Steve Cohen went for it all last season and it didn't work out. Yeah, they complained it didn't work out, but nobody's going to be mad at Steve Cohen for going at it. This year, they did absolutely nothing. Yeah, they got JD Martinez at a cheap price. But the fact of the matter is that you're lying to your fans saying this team has it, and it's been anything but it through the first 6 games. So if it continues to be that way, it's safe to say I think there's going to be a lot of angry Mets fans who might as well start protesting games and keeping an empty ballpark, and you can't blame them.
Yeah, today was an embarrassment. I know it was a Thursday in April and it was a doubleheader, but there was like 500 fans there. I mean, it was a sunny day. It was 55 degrees and nobody's there. Completely pathetic. But I don't completely disagree with what you're saying, because my worry is getting value back on these trades, because I'm hoping with David Stearns versus Billy Epler, there's going to be a little more foresight if they do trade to make sure that there's actually assets coming back, because I don't want the Mets just dumping good players just for the sake of dumping them and not actually launching a rebuild by getting good prospects. They did do that well with Scherzer and Verlander, but there have been many deals over the last few years, particularly in the Steve Cohen era, that have been very, very questionable in terms of the Mets' return when they've been trading guys. But yeah, they did next to nothing this year going in. JD Martinez really doesn't count. And The whole Scott Boras thing is ridiculous too, because he's not even ready to play yet this year. He's got to go play in the minors first, which is why Scott Boras and all of them are kind of destroying Major League Baseball. But that's a whole other topic for another day. But, and the whole frustrating thing too, as someone who is also a Brooklyn Nets fan, I am trying to root for two franchises right now that have no direction whatsoever. The Mets' whole goal, remember at the end of the season last year, Steve Cohen comes out and says, the goal is to be competitive by 2025. Then what's the point of this season? What are we trying to accomplish here? Just not be competitive? Yet he says that not making the playoffs would be a huge disappointment. Well, I think those things kind of go along. They're not mutually exclusive. If you're competitive, you're trying to make the playoffs. If you're not competitive, you're not trying to make the playoffs. So what's the goal here? I don't get it. I really don't get what the direction is right now. You have some prospects who have come up. Alvarez is the only one that I think is really a hit. I don't care if Brett Beatty's made a couple of nice plays with his glove, because for every one he does, he messes up too. And Mark Vientos, they've ruined him because of having him be shadowed by Daniel Vogelbach for a year and a half. So they have nothing in the pipeline right now in the farm system. So I wouldn't be against trading people and doing a fire sale if the season falls apart. But right now, it just feels like the franchise has no direction at all. And that's what's really frustrating as a fan. And it's the same frustrations I have for the team in another borough in Brooklyn and the Nets. But let's transition to the Yankees, Tim, who have gotten off to a great start to this year. They get the 4-game sweep of Houston. Obviously, beating the Astros in October is a whole lot more momentous than beating them in March and April. But you know what? It set a tone. And right now, for the Yankees, Juan Soto, we knew he was going to be good on a contract year. I just don't see a way that the Yankees let Juan Soto leave unless for some reason Juan Soto just hates being in pinstripes, because they're going to give him the money. Just the way that he's changed the dynamic of that lineup, and the fact that you have that Astros series where Aaron Judge didn't even look that good at the plate, but you have another top 10 player in Major League Baseball that can offset that. And Juan Soto, who while he doesn't have the power numbers quite like Judge, I think as a pure hitter is a better hitter than Aaron Judge, and as a fielder is a better fielder than Aaron Judge. And to have that in your lineup is huge. And of course, some of the prospects that have come up for the Yankees have worked out. And even without Garrett Cole, the starting pitching, for the most part, these first two series against Houston and Arizona, two good teams that are going to be probably in the playoffs, they're both doing their jobs.
Yeah, I would say the Yankees have really done a good job to start the season. And listen, last episode, I was very critical on the Yankees. And I will give Brian Cashman this credit. The people he has brought in for this season, to this point, has stepped up, and has stepped up good. Juan Soto, I can't say enough about what he's done. But I do want to say one thing about the contract situation, right? I feel very indifferent about it, right? Because obviously he's a Scott Boras agent, so it's likely going to the offseason. But I also kind of feel like the Yankees have a little bit of leverage in this situation, Eddie, because think about it. Scott Boras just had the most embarrassing offseason as an agent in his career. Every single person he had lost money and did not even sign to the value of what he got. Blake Snell, for example, was offered more money to play for the Yankees. Granted, again, I still felt the Yankees should have more urgency in pursuing him. Offered Blake Snell more money than he ultimately signed for to play in San Francisco. And my point is this: do you want to go through that again and experience that if you're Juan Soto? And there's a lot of people talking about crazy amounts of money, about the Yankees potentially giving him $700 million. Listen, Shohei Ohtani, unfortunately, is an anomaly. He pitches and he hits. And right now, all he can do is hit. I already said, if you were to give me the scenario of who I'm paying $700, to be truthfully honest with you, it would have been Aaron Judge and not Shohei Ohtani. But that's the fact of the matter. That's way too much money. That's its own problem, Major League Baseball, with the Dodgers. But I am very impressed with what I've seen by Juan Soto. And truthfully, Eddie, and again, I know it's only a small sample size of 7 games down a series between Arizona and Houston. But what has impressed me about the New York Yankees is it's not the long ball winning them the games. Aaron Judge hit his first home run yesterday. The Yankees have turned around and found production with guys like Oswaldo Cabrera, who, let's be honest, was in a do-or-die situation because of injuries. He likely was not the option that would have been playing at third base, but yet he's come out hot to start with his bat. You found guys producing, overall, like just I said, Juan Soto not really producing the long ball to do it. And the Yankees, the big thing, moving over runners. It's something completely different with a different lineup, but you're seeing it. Anthony Volpe, they mentioned during the offseason about how he shortened up his swing, kind of gave him the flatter approach. Now he's hitting more line drives. You're seeing the changes of a second year player. So overall for the Yankees, if you would have told me they're 6-1 through a 7-game series with a team that just went to the World Series, as well as a team that's favorite and we picked ultimately to be in the World Series this year, I think it's a positive sign moving forward. But again, I need to emphasize this, and this is the big thing that I talk about in the Yankees in the past. You have a division lead. That is so important early in the season. But when you look at teams like Baltimore, who have a very good farm system, the Yankees do not, there's a lot of potential future upgrades that that team can do. How can Brian Cashman counteract that? Being urgent. When you see a problem, you see injuries, add to depth. Right now, I'm going to be honest with you. I've not been impressed by Nestor Cortez. I know it's 2 starts, but he had a very shaky as well preseason. Could Nestor find himself out of the rotation eventually? I don't know. Of course, when Garrett Cole comes back, we'll see. I think Louis Gill, or Gill, however you pronounce his last name, still don't understand how to pronounce it after 2-3 years to this point. But I think he does deserve a chance in the big leagues. And really, I know he's had a lot of health issues in the past, but does deserve a chance to pitch productively for his success. And that's ultimately my last point I'll make about the Yankees is this. This is what actually scares me a little bit about the Yankees later on this season, what happens. Because Juan Soto is going to play every day. Aaron Judge is going to play every day, obviously. If Alex Verdugo continues producing and he doesn't play just like a pure platoon hitter, what are you going to do with Jason Dominguez when this season comes later? Because eventually he's going to come back. And I don't want to see him in a Clint Frazier scenario where what happens? He's just going to have no role. He's going to go up and down the minor leagues. And then by the time you get to an important spot where you got to play him every day, he either gets hurt or something doesn't set him up right. So I'm eager to see how the Yankees handle that. But I don't have much to complain about to this point, surprisingly. I thought I'd have a lot more to complain about the Yankees, but let's see after this off day tomorrow if they can keep it going. And again, I think it's going to be a race with Baltimore all year long. I truthfully still think the Baltimore Orioles are the best team in the AL East, but truthfully, you can't really look at Baltimore until your Jackson Holidays and your farm system comes up because, again, they have the best farm system in baseball. There is no exaggeration on that. There's a lot of guys down there that can produce today, and you just have to wait till the end of the month because, of course, Baltimore wants the extra year. So we'll see what happens, but this is a good start for the New York Yankees.
So that's the Yankees. We've dove into the Mets as well. We're only a week into the season, so definitely more speculation and analysis will come in the coming weeks. Other big storyline for Major League Baseball, the Oakland A's have a tentative home for the next 3 years, it seems like. It's not in Oakland. It's not in Las Vegas. They're playing in Sacramento, which is where the Sacramento River Cats AAA team plays. It's only 10,000 seats. And they claim they're going to expand the capacity to 14,000, but it's still only 10K, which they're still not even going to be able to fill 50% most likely. And the dimensions are so small because it's a AAA field. I understand when there were the restrictions from COVID and the Blue Jays had to do that in Buffalo for a 60-game season, but for 3 years to play in a minor league ballpark, this is ridiculous because, again, it's not just that there's not a lot of seats there. And again, for the A's, given the current situation, that's not going to be a problem. The issue is the measurements. The field is smaller on a AAA field. To that scale, it's crazy. I know Yankee Stadium and Fenway Park and Citizens Bank Park are, little bandboxes, but I mean, a AAA stadium is ridiculous. And it's just another step on this ever-evolving saga of the A's that were used to be one of the proud franchises of the American League for years, even when they played in a couple different cities. And now they are just so far behind the other 29 major league clubs.
Can we just maybe, I don't know, take the Savannah Bananas and just replace them with the A's? And
Yeah,
I think
best performing AAA team. Just call them up and demote the A's. We should do this English soccer style. Do a little promotion demotion.
I mean, this is ridiculous. And here's the other thing too that we have to remember. And somebody brought up a very good point to me that I didn't even think about. The Las Vegas Aces are the A's ultimately minor league team, and they're in Las Vegas. So think about this too. You're going to have two teams marked in Las Vegas that they're moving to. So it's like, to me, overall, I just don't know what to begin to think about the A's. If you are a diehard A's fan and you're watching this show, I would hope you're A, not going to A's games unless it's going to be the last game of the Coliseum, or and B, to be truthfully honest with you, if you are for this move to Las Vegas, the question is why? Because to me, the A's have done nothing proper. They have not cared about their fan base. They're making this move down to Sacramento. Why would you want to go watch them for 3 years in a place that's only really known for basketball in California and really has no true connection to the A's or fandom? Why are they going there, Eddie? It's simple. It's a cheaper solution. And what are the A's ultimately? Cheap. It is embarrassing when you look at their roster up and down, when I'm talking about potentially JD Davis being their most explosive player, and that's not really saying much. And I look at the team and it's like, it's just a joke. It's an absolute joke. And I can't understand it, right? We jokingly talk about the Mets a little bit ago, but oh yeah, they're the 2008 Detroit Lions. But there's so there's so much more talent on the Mets to believe that they have quote unquote potential, even though they're not living up to that potential anywhere near close, than there is to A's. There's no urgency. And I'm not saying the pandemic killed the Oakland A's, but I really can't think of the Oakland A's being good since what, Mark Hanna was last there before he went to the Mets.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it like this. It's like, I remember back when the A's traded for John Lester, there was a sense of urgency, like, oh my God, the A's are finally going for it. But the A's, truthfully, have not been a consistent, relevant franchise in terms of being a contender since the Reggie Jackson days. And again, I get it. They like to play money ball, as we know from the documentary, right? But at the end of the day, it's 2024. The world is a lot more expensive. Baseball is a lot more expensive. Obviously, yes, they can't compete with the Dodgers. To be quite frank, nobody can compete with the Dodgers and the BS that they're pulling with money and so on. But at the end of the day, you still have to find a way to put together a productive baseball team. And when you don't have that, and then you're going to move away, and you're just going to completely neglect, I don't know, I guess your 6 fans you have left remaining because of how betrayed they feel. To me, it's an absolute joke and it's a disgrace. And one more thing, too. I don't mean to bring up Zach Campbell, but there was something about a year and a half ago that really got in my mind, right? And I view baseball being very different in regards to the one thing this sport has the possibility of, that's creating long lasting memories and connections. And what I mean by that is when you have things like batting practice, for example, right? Kids going to the ballpark early, getting to see players, getting autographs, right? It's not saying that, for example, I know people perceive Zach a negative way because of his actions. That's not what I'm justifying. But the point is, doing these and having these moments, to me, makes a long lasting memory for a kid. The Oakland Coliseum hardly opens before first pitch. I think it's like 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. But more often than not, you completely miss batting practice and you can't even access certain areas and certain things. So my point is just simply this, Eddie. It's the fact that A, nobody's going to the games as it is, but B, Oakland itself is, outside of not doing a service for building its baseball team, but doing a service to its fans to giving them a reason to come into the park. And to me, what this ultimately leads to, and why I say this, is because it's a failed attempt and it's a failed direction all around. It is a failing, disastrous business. And unless Oakland sells its team, there is going to be no progress, which is why I am pleading. If you are an Oakland A's fan, you better not be at a game in Sacramento. You better not go see a game in Las Vegas. I know it stinks, but the only way you can get change is if you protest in unison. And I feel like the A's fan group has done a very good job of that, outside of opening day, of course, because it's opening day, but not showing up into your stadium, because that's how you make it loud and clear, is when you start taking money out of the pockets of the people in charge. And that's when people start getting upset. And sadly, in this world today, that's the only way you'll make change, is when you start impacting the rich. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to go political, but that is the truth if you're a baseball fan.
Comrade Tim Moore. Um, anyway, but that's Major League Baseball for you. One storyline before we get to the Final Fours that I completely forgot in the intro that we got to dive into. Stefon Diggs, after all the rumors, all the weird tweets for the last half decade, finally is no longer a Buffalo Bill. He goes to the Houston Texans. First of all, I mean, I don't think there's much to discuss here. The Texans are absolutely contenders in the AFC. Obviously, we know what Patrick Mahomes and his voodoo magic can do, but best of the rest, probably the Houston Texans right now when you look at that offense that has now added both Joe Mixon and Stefon Diggs into the fold this offseason, plus Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, and of course, CJ Stroud at quarterback. That team is legit. But Buffalo, what do we do here? I mean, Gabe Davis is also gone. So I guess Shakir is their number one receiver at this point. And Josh Allen, I know Stefon Diggs had his off games, but Josh Allen counted on Stefon Diggs. And it's not like Josh Allen can do everything here. It's almost starting to feel like the Bills could fall into an LA Chargers situation of what we've seen the last few years, where it's one quarterback who's being forced to do just about everything. And while I think Josh Allen is a more dynamic player than Justin Herbert, I think the same idea stands true because Josh Allen has nothing to work with right now. And you lose Stefon Diggs, you trade him away this late into the going, too, after free agency has really passed. It's like the draft and then whoever the hanging around pieces are that aren't on a team right now, that's pretty much their options at this point. So I almost feel like with this symbolizes the Bills' run kind of closing, at least for now. I just don't see a way this team can contend with the Chiefs and the others in the AFC at this point. And I mean, last year was their big chance. The Chiefs were so vulnerable. You get a home playoff game against Kansas City and you can't beat them. And the Bills, it's been the story of that franchise since the Jim Kelly era when they dropped 4 straight Super Bowls. They just cannot get it done when it matters most.
Yeah, it's a really questionable decision to trade Stefon Diggs because at least when in the past when they made certain trades, rather if it was Sammy Watkins or other things, right? It felt like there'd be some sense of direction of getting a target for one of their quarterbacks. Josh Allen is not Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. Again, I think he's the greatest all time by the time we get to the end of his career. But when it's said and done, when you don't even know who your number one receiver is and you don't really have the draft capital to trade up, to me, it makes no sense. And yet, even though they received Minnesota's pick, may I add, even though it's not Houston's in the second round, I just don't know. I really don't know. And what does this mean for Josh Allen moving forward? I think they could potentially even be shopping Josh Allen at this point. I think this is what it is. To be honest with you, Eddie, the Bills evaluated, and the problem is they evaluated too late, and now people are going to be left in question. And to me, I don't see them being contender at least in the AFC East. Probably at best a wild card team. It doesn't mean that the quarterback isn't good and can't win them games, but the Bills have a lot more to worry about outside of the receiver position. Their defense still needs to get better. They've lost corners and so on that they're going to have to replenish as well to build a solid secondary again. So I feel for the Bills all around. You're going to have to find a direction. And I mean, yes, technically you have the quarterback under center to do it, but if you don't have targets that you can't rely on, like for example, Curtis Samuel, he has a history of not being healthy. That's just the fact of the matter. And he didn't really do a lot in Washington over these last few years. Yeah, he was kind of universal. He can run the ball, he can catch, but you don't really have a solid behind Josh Allen. So we're going to see what happens to them moving forward. But man, what a move for Houston. I can already see it now. The Kansas City Chiefs, the Houston Texans, AFC Championship. This is the best Houston has looked since the Arian Foster days in terms of depth of what this team can provide. I really am bought in. And again, you know how I'm never big about Ohio State quarterbacks, but CJ Stroud has proven over 1 year, not just that he's an MVP caliber quarterback, but the kind of potential he has and to live to those big moments. And I can't say enough about the Texans. I mean, I love the sense of urgency, and it's definitely a lot better than what they were at this point. I don't know, 3, 4 seasons ago, before the Deshaun Watson trade, where it felt like there was no sense of direction and this team was completely lost in ownership.
Yeah, it's crazy how quickly the tides have turned. It's funny, we were just talking about the Oakland A's, who were winning 90 games a year 5 years ago and now are the bottom feeders in Major League Baseball. Texans are the opposite. They were good. They have that playoff game against Kansas City back in, I believe, 2018, 2019, when they were up 24 on the Chiefs and lost. Then the whole thing happens with Deshaun Watson. They're a mess for 2 years. It works out. They get CJ Stroud, who might be the biggest hit from the draft last year. And like you said, not like an ordinary Ohio State quarterback. He's so composed. People often forget, too, that game against the Colts in week 18 was essentially a playoff game. Winner of that game went to the postseason. So he won 2 playoff games essentially as a rookie and then put up a good fight against Lamar Jackson and the #1 ranked Ravens defense on the road at M&T Bank Stadium. So give credit where credit is due. You add Joe Mixon, who's still a top 10 running back in this league, and Stefon Diggs, who's a top 10 receiver, plus 2 rookie receivers that he had great chemistry with, and Dalton Schultz, who's one of the most underrated tight ends in the NFL. And you have one heck of an offense. And again, you said depth not seen since the Arian Foster era. I'd say this might be the most depth offensively the Texans have ever had, dating all the way back to when they first became a franchise in the late 90s, early 2000s. I've never really seen this from this team. And I know they've made the playoffs. They've had some good rosters, the Matt Schaub era, obviously Deshaun Watson. But to have this group, and D'Amico Ryans looks like a really talented coach as well, with the way he schemed in some tough games against Tampa Bay, against Cincinnati when they went on that nice run middle of the season last year. I really like this move for the Texans. But let's finish with the Final Four. Let's go to the women's side of things first. We hyped it up last year when LSU and Iowa matched up. Whether you like Caitlin Clark or not and her attitude, and whether you like LSU or not and those players' attitudes, and Kim Mulkey as a coach, which I'm not a fan of any of them, but you can't deny that these players and those coaches are the reason that women's basketball has reached the height that it currently is at now. Most watched women's tournament game ever in the Elite Eight between LSU and Iowa, beat out some figures from several men's tournament games and from every NBA playoff game from last year on the exact same network. And, people are really getting into the sport. And I think it's a good learning experience for leaders and executives in other sports to realize, you know what? When you have a generational talent, you have to capitalize on marketing it. Women's basketball has done that to a T with Caitlin Clark. I know it's been a little much at sometimes. I mean, those Fox games with her were ridiculous, where on the score bug, you literally just have the entire game of how many points Caitlin Clark has. But it makes people want to watch. Whether they know it or not, and whether they like it or not, they're tuning in to see how she plays. And even the haters, they're tuning in because they want to see her play bad, and usually she doesn't. It's really I think, something that other sports that are struggling and women's sports can learn from. If you have someone of that echelon, of that level of talent, you need to make sure you market them. And NCAA women's basketball has done that. They've capitalized. And I really think even after Caitlin Clark moves on to the WNBA, women's college basketball has started something now where they're going to be on the trend. Obviously, the viewership numbers might not be quite where they were this past week, but I think they've definitely brought in a lot more fans that will watch more than just Caitlin Clark.
No, absolutely. I think they have. And I think moving forward, rather you like Caitlin Clark's decision or not to go to the WNBA after this year, I think the fact of the matter is that it's going to also benefit the WNBA moving forward. And again, I said this, what, now 6, 7 months ago, and I truthfully, and I said on this show multiple times, I view Caitlin Clark to be the greatest women's basketball player out of college since Brianna Stewart in terms of the success standpoint and the evaluation. You look at what she has to bring. She is pure electricity. Her accomplishments cannot be diminished. And what you saw in that LSU game is just the passion, right, that Caitlin Clark brings and the energy to set records, to understand the sense of clutch. I'm not saying she's LeBron James by any means, but what made LeBron James so exciting the young portions of his career. It wasn't just because he was clutch. He made that exciting moment when it mattered. And yes, LeBron did, it took him a long time to win a championship, but you felt that sense of energy. What people are seeing on the women's side is Caitlin Clark is exactly that. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not an Iowa basketball fan by any means. Of course, on the women's basketball side, and men's, I kind of root for UConn a little bit, not exactly as a fan, but more the sense of just, past ties from where I am here in
You're a
Austin.
UConn fan?
But
I've known you for 5 years. I've never known
I'm not
this.
a UConn fan. I'm a sense of supporting UConn because we've had a lot of Austin players that have went to UConn
Okay.
over the years. So that's that. I don't really declare a team. Like, for example, I love NC State. Not as a fan, but I love what they're doing, for example. But when it's all said and done, I don't see a path. I really don't see a path, Eddie, where you can't tell me when it's all said and done that Caitlin Clark doesn't end her college career the greatest of all time without winning a college championship. It just can't happen. So to me, I'm rooting for Iowa to win all the way through the Final Four and the national championship. And let's be honest, I think the whole world is rooting for that because everybody has found the player that they love and they can root for. And that's where it starts with fandom for sports. So that's what you got to hope moving forward. And for the record, I I think you're going to see a lot, even on the men's side. I think you're going to see really tight contested games that can go in any direction, but it comes down to game seven moments, as they say in college in March Madness. It's unpredictable, but you can expect Caitlin Clark to be there, and the best players when they take the floor step up in the big moments, and she's done that. She did it against LSU, for example. She's only going to do it moving forward. I really think they can win the national championship.
I think so too. And if they beat UConn, what a spectacle that would be. Likely playing against South Carolina, who's undefeated this year. Caitlin Clark trying to beat a team potentially that at that point would be 72-1 over the last two seasons. That would definitely draw millions of eyes. Shout out to UConn and NC State because both those schools got both of their basketball programs in the Final Four. Never happened before that multiple schools have both men's and women's in the national semis in the same year. The men's side, it's an interesting mix. I know, Tim, you have your opinions on March Madness and that it's a crapshoot and everything. I love it. I love the drama of it. But I do see where you're coming from one aspect. I like this group this year. NC State is the one Cinderella story, but you have three other teams who have consistently been top 10 in the country this year. UConn, Alabama, and Purdue, undisputed three of the best teams in the nation. Last year was weird with all the upsets. It almost got to a little too much. I mean, when you got San Diego State and Florida Atlantic playing for a spot in the national championship. I love the chaos, but at the same time, I do enjoy a little bit of a break from it. You love the Cinderella stories. That Jack Golke guy for Oakland is a legend to beat Kentucky and Calipari and future NBA players. But I mean, of course, you gotta love what's happening at NC State with DJ Burns. And what a matchup that's going to be on Saturday in the paint, because you've got someone in Zach Edey who's very big vertically, and then you've got DJ Burns who's very big horizontally. It's like I don't know how to even compare it. It's like Tim Moore versus Shaq down low, and may the best man win.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be exciting. And I think the big thing, moving forward for NC State is that they've been the Cinderella, right, the entire time. But I don't know how to put it where it feels like we get to this point every year where there's gonna be one team. And let's be honest, on the opposite side, right? UConn, and I'm not talking about the game, but UConn, for example, what's been the story about UConn all year, Eddie? They've dominated almost every single thing they've done in men's basketball this year. It feels like games aren't even close. But no matter who wins on the other side, right? Assuming UConn wins, guess what? It's not going to be close. It'll be a national championship game. And my point is this: is yeah, you're going to see the movable object versus the unstoppable force, as they say in WrestleMania terms, right? That's happening this weekend. That you're going to see in this game. But when it's all said and done, again, it comes down to big moments. That's what I just can't emphasize enough. And it's going to have eyes. It's going to be exciting. But man, again, I think no matter who wins the national championship in the past years, I would say, yeah, I'm happy for whoever wins. As long as it's not Purdue, that's all that I care about. So yeah, I hope you're watching this, Tyler.
Yeah, I hope he is too. There's still time for them to have a heartbreaking loss, and it could happen on Saturday. DJ Burns has a great chance to do the funniest thing ever and end Zach Edey's career. And oh, by the way, if that happens, Purdue would lose to a double-digit seed in the NCAA tournament for the fourth consecutive year. So that's what I'm really hoping for. So we'll see what happens, but we'll definitely have a lot to dive into on next week's episode. Because next time we're on the air, national champions will be crowned on the men's and women's side. We'll also be within 1 week of the NBA play-in tournament to start the playoffs. And oh, by the way, we're in April now. NFL draft's right around the corner. We're definitely going to have some comments and some guests to talk about that in the month of April. So a lot to be excited about. Major League Baseball is underway. Maybe not so much for me to be excited about at that stadium back there, but
Yeah, at
a lot
least
to
Mets
discuss
tickets
nonetheless. Go ahead.
cheap now. So at least Mets tickets will be cheap now. You'll be able to go to the game for cheap.
You think I want to go see this team play? I'm good.
I mean, yeah, but it's like now, for example, even being a Yankees fan, I don't know if I want to spend $100 to sit in section 105 to watch. I mean, granted, I love Juan Soto, but do I want to watch them play the Royals for $100 or even watch them play the Mets if they're, I don't know, 1 in 1,000?
Go see them
Like,
play the A's in the bleacher creatures. Go sit in the bleachers. You could watch Oakland. They're a very funny team. I think they play there in April. But yeah, that's going to be it for this episode of Sports Speak Live. Reminder, we are always powered by SeatGeek. Baseball season, that's a good place to buy your tickets if you want to go sit with Bleacher Creatures at Yankee Stadium. Use our promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word. To do that, you'll get $20 off your first online purchase. But until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
and I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off here for Sports Speak Live, episode 169. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.